They believed discipline meant staying silent, that if she didn't raise her voice, she'd never raise a hand. So when Captain Broderick slapped Lieutenant Commander Jade Cross across the face in front of 30 witnesses, he thought he'd won. No protest, no emotion, no consequence. She simply adjusted her collar and walked out. But what no one realized was that she wasn't walking away. She was walking toward correction. And by the time Broderick stumbled into her night drill unprepared, by the time his pride hit the ground harder than his body, the entire base would understand what happens when you strike the wrong seal. Before we show you how the system balanced itself and what happened when she finally spoke just 5 words, make sure you're subscribed with the bell icon turned on. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, and stay right here. Because this story isn't about revenge. It's about control. It's about the moment discipline pushed back. The fluorescent lights in Joint Tactical Classroom 4 hummed faintly above, flickering, as if even they sensed the tension about to break. Lieutenant Commander Jade Cross stood at the front of the room, hands clasped behind her back. On the projector screen glowed a simple slide. Behavioral Command. Stress Response Phase 2. No theatrics, no music, just doctrine and control. When she spoke, her tone carried no weight in volume, only precision in meaning. Real leadership, she said evenly, begins with how you react when you're challenged, not by threat, but by ego. 30 officers filled the tiered rows, Marine captains, Navy lieutenants, even a few Air Force crossposts, attending a joint seminar on psychological endurance under pressure. Captain Broderick lounged 2 rows from the front, arms stretched across the chairs beside him, legs spread like he owned the air in the room. The smirk never left his face. Beside him, Lieutenant Hale whispered something under his breath. Broderick chuckled. Jade ignored it. She'd stood in rooms like this before. Firing ranges, frozen bays, tribunal hearings. There was always one, sometimes 2, who mistook composure for weakness. Lieutenant Hale, she said calmly, without looking up from her clipboard. You're up. Simulation Scenario 4. Hale stayed put, biting the inside of his cheek. Pass, he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. Not in the mood for pretend drills today. Jade lifted her eyes, the calm in them sharper than command. Excuse me? Jade asked, her tone cutting through the room like a clean blade. Hale leaned forward, his words dripping with smug confidence. With all due respect, Commander, some of us prefer real-world experience over PowerPoint slides. A few chuckles rippled through the crowd, not brave ones, just nervous echoes. Before Jade could answer, Captain Broderick rose from his chair, swaggering down the aisle like the room belonged to him. I'll show how it's done, he declared, his voice booming with performative authority. Let's see how your model handles actual stress. He stopped just 2 feet from her, close enough to feel the heat between them, his jaw set, shoulders squared. The silence cracked like static. Then he did it. A sharp, open-handed slap across her face. The sound snapped through the air like a gunshot. The entire room gasped, audibly, collectively, disbelieving. But Jade didn't flinch. Her head stayed still. No stagger, no recoil, not even a blink. The only movement was the faint shift of her collar from the impact. Calmly, she reached up, straightened it, then fixed her eyes on him. Steady, unshaken. You've just failed a real-world test, Captain, she said evenly, her voice as cold as the steel in her rank. One designed to measure restraint. Then she turned away from the podium. Class dismissed. No one moved, not a cough, not a breath. Just the quiet hum of realization settling over 30 officers who suddenly understood who held control. Jade walked out without another word, and before the first whisper could rise, the door had already closed behind her. The U.S. Navy Advanced Leadership Academy in San Diego wasn't built for silence. Between cadence calls, whistles, and the low growl of passing jets, quiet rarely lasted more than a second. But that afternoon, after the slap, the air stayed heavy. Rumors travel fast on military bases, faster when ego bleeds. By the time Lieutenant Commander Jade Cross returned her clipboard to admin and crossed the quad without a sound, 3 versions of the event were already circulating. One said she froze. Another claimed she whispered something that made Broderick back down before she left. A third, more dramatic version insisted she'd been too stunned to react at all. Near the mess deck vending machines, 2 Navy officers spoke in hushed tones. "She just stood there," one muttered. "Didn't flinch, didn't fight back, just walked off." "What kind of training teaches that?" the other asked. "The SEAL kind, apparently." "Bull, SEALs don't just take hits." Across the base, in the officers' lounge, Broderick had already rewritten the story to his liking. "She cracked," he bragged, tossing a stress ball between his hands. "Didn't know how to react. Looked like someone cut the power. I expected her to shout, maybe lose it, but nothing, just folded." He took a sip from his paper cup like he hadn't just assaulted a superior officer in front of 30 witnesses. Hale lounged beside him, smirking. "She's all theory," he said, "no bite." But not everyone was laughing. From the mezzanine above the lower quad, Commander Elias Rivas stood with his arms crossed, eyes fixed on the horizon. He'd been watching Jade all morning, not out of doubt, but because he knew exactly what kind of person she was. He'd seen her under pressure before, years ago in Djibouti, before the knee injury that pulled her from the field. He knew what she could do when cornered. And as he watched her disappear down the corridor toward the auxiliary training wing, he didn't see retreat. He saw intent. He'd been watching Cross's movements since early morning, not out of doubt, but because he knew exactly who she was. Commander Elias Rivas had served beside her in Djibouti before the knee injury pulled her from field ops. He'd seen firsthand what she could do when backed into a corner. Now he watched her disappear into the narrow corridor leading to the auxiliary facility's sign-out desk. A few minutes later, a staff technician jogged up to him. "Sir, just letting you know Lieutenant Commander Cross has signed out the close-quarters reflex bay for tonight. It's not on the schedule." Rivas didn't blink. "Who's on the participant list?" The tech hesitated. Captain Broderick, Lieutenant Hale, and 2 others from her seminar group. Rivas gave one slow nod. "Good. Make sure the tower's watching. No overrides." Meanwhile, near the recreation hall, a junior ensign named Fields stood hesitating outside Jade's office door. He'd trained under her 2 years back and still remembered the day she'd outshot 3 snipers in a confidence drill, never raising her voice once. He knocked softly. No answer. He tried again. "Ma'am, just checking in. Are you okay?" The door opened halfway. Lieutenant Commander Jade Cross stood in full uniform, eyes steady, tired, but calm. No trace of a bruise, no anger in her tone. "I'm fine, Ensign," she said quietly. "Protocol will correct itself." Then she closed the door as gently as she'd spoken. By 1700 hours, the sun slid low over the Pacific, throwing long amber streaks across the motor pool and barracks. Conversations in the chow line had shifted. Less laughter, more murmurs. "Did you see the roster? She really isn't saying anything?" No one had read her file, but rumors had lives of their own. Naval Special Warfare, blackout missions, classified ops. One said she'd swum 5 miles through frozen surf after a failed satellite link in Norway. Another claimed she once disarmed a hostage taker with nothing but a metal pen. None of it confirmed, but no one dared ask. They weren't waiting for her to react. They were waiting for whatever came next, something none of them could name. And somewhere under the hum of those whispers, Broderick laughed again. The locker bay by Building C always smelled of chalk, metal, and rubber mats soaked in sweat, but that evening it felt colder, heavier. Not from air conditioning, but from absence. Lieutenant Commander Jade Cross stood alone before the full-length mirror bolted to the far wall. The fluorescent light flickered overhead. Her uniform jacket rested neatly on the bench beside her. She wore the regulation black undershirt, sleeves rolled once. Her hair, still damp at the edges, was pulled back into a tight braid. The faint mark on her cheek had faded, not swollen, not red, just the ghost of a touch, visible only if you looked for it. She wasn't checking out of vanity, she was verifying purpose. She leaned toward the mirror, fingertips brushing the skin as if testing a memory's weight. A flash returned, uninvited, Hell Week. Bud S., Phase 1. She was 24, soaked to the bone, eyes twitching from exhaustion. An instructor had screamed in her face, waiting for her to flinch. She never did, so he'd slapped her, hard. Not to hurt her, but to expose her limits, to see where she'd break. She hadn't broken then. She didn't break now. That same line from the past echoed in her mind, the one her old mentor had murmured over the wind and salt spray years ago. You don't flinch at pain. You respond to purpose. Lieutenant Commander Jade Cross stared into her reflection and mouthed the words again, her jaw setting just enough to lock the thought in place. Then she turned, opened her locker in one smooth, deliberate motion. Inside, on the top shelf, was a small sealed pouch. Nothing regulation, nothing tactical. Just a strip of soft black cloth rolled tight around one item, her old SEAL combat patch. She hadn't worn it in 3 years. Not since the injury, not since she'd been reassigned to psychological command instruction. But she'd kept it, not as nostalgia, but as a compass, a reminder of where control truly began. Jade unrolled the cloth, tracing her thumb across the faded stitching. Then she set it gently on the bench, not to reattach, only to see it again under the light. From the lower shelf she pulled her logbook, flipped to a blank page, and wrote 3 precise words across the top. Reinstate demonstration protocol. Beneath that, she added the date, then circled it once. The sound of the locker latch closing was sharp, deliberate, final, like a seal being set. Outside, the base intercom buzzed to life with the evening routine. Announcements crackled. The chow schedule, the rotation briefing, the hum of normality pretending nothing had changed. But Jade zipped her jacket, slid the patch back into its pouch, and walked out. No slammed doors, no sound at all. She moved through the corridor like a quiet current, measured, exact, unstoppable. She was heading for the one place on base where noise didn't matter. Because what came next wasn't about sound, it was about control. By 1900 hours, the mess hall had turned into a furnace of heat and chatter. Metal trays clanged, utensils scraped, and the scent of overcooked chicken tangled with a new, uneasy undercurrent, nervous energy. Captain Broderick sat at the center aisle, boots kicked onto a chair, sleeves rolled high like a man who hadn't just humiliated a superior officer. She just stared at me, he said between mouthfuls, grinning. Didn't move, didn't blink, like a cardboard cutout in a uniform. A few officers laughed, hesitant and unsure if they were supposed to. Others just kept their eyes down, pretending to eat. Lieutenant Hale leaned forward with a grin. I almost feel bad, he said. Almost? Broderick snorted. You feel bad when you lose. We didn't lose. We proved a point. At the next table, Ensign Forrester kept his focus on his tray but listened closely. He'd been in that classroom. He'd seen her face, seen that silence, and he knew it hadn't meant surrender. She hadn't raised a hand because she didn't need to. Hale stretched in his chair, smirking. Crazy, right? Considering all that SEAL stuff they say she's done. Broderick's grin widened. Maybe she's more talk than teeth. At the far corner of the mess, Petty Officer Lorne quietly pushed his tray aside and stood up. He wasn't under Jade's command, but he'd served long enough to recognize that kind of silence, the kind that comes before something precise, inevitable, and cold. He circled the perimeter of the room and made his way to the operations tower. 15 minutes later, he knocked on Commander Rivas's office door. "She's running it tonight," Lorne began. Rivas didn't need to ask who. "You saw the schedule?" She signed out the reflex bay, unannounced drill. Broderick's on the roster. Rivas closed the training manual slowly, the faintest hint of a knowing smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Hale?" Lorne nodded. Both of them, plus 2 other officers from her seminar. One of the men mentioned she'd requested infrared tracking and observation clearance. Rivas let out a slow breath. "Did she log it?" "Logged and signed. Equipment confirmed," Lorne replied. Rivas rose and crossed to the wall cabinet, lowering a pair of observation goggles and a headset. "Good." Lorne arched an eyebrow. "Prep a medic?" he asked. Rivas shook his head. "No, but have someone there to witness what real correction looks like." Back in the mess, the mood had shifted again. Word had spread. Broderick and Hale had been picked for a special after-hours exercise. No briefing, no prep, no details, just a direct request from Lieutenant Commander Jade Cross. Some called it a redemption drill and laughed it off. Others weren't so sure. "Wait, she's going to run it herself?" a Marine whispered. "She's not going to fight, right?" someone else asked. No one answered. People weren't laughing anymore. Not really. When the base floodlights flicked on and red lamps bathed the training perimeter, 2 things were clear. Jade Cross hadn't flinched, and she hadn't forgotten. The close-quarters reflex facility sat at the southern edge of the Naval Leadership Academy, beyond the drone hangars and K-9 kennels. From outside, it looked like a plain gray box. No signs, no windows. Inside was a maze of plywood corridors, movable walls, blackout zones, and infrared sensors. Hostage rescues, ambush drills. Everything had been run here before, but not like this. At exactly 2100 hours, the interior lights shifted from white to low-red combat illumination. Ceiling cameras clicked on, streaming live to the control tower on the northwest corner. A thin pane of glass separated the observers from whatever would happen below. Lieutenant Commander Jade Cross stood alone at the center of the briefing grid. No clipboard, no creased khakis, no instructor's cadence. She wore a fitted black tactical training uniform, unmarked but regulation issued. Sleeves rolled once, her braid tucked under a protective mesh cap. No body armor, no combat boots, just light trainers and silent, flexible gloves. Her stance was neutral and ready. Hands folded behind her back, feet evenly planted, she stared forward. Commander Elias Rivas watched from the tower, headset on. "Sir, is this certifiable?" a junior training officer whispered. Rivas didn't answer. He was watching what mattered. Below, Captain Broderick, Lieutenant Hale, and 2 junior officers stepped into the ready chamber. Broderick noticed the lighting first. "Going full Hollywood tonight, huh?" he barked. Hale smirked and nudged a colleague. "This is gonna be fun," Broderick said. The 2 neutral participants didn't laugh. One looked like he wanted to ask something but thought better of it. Jade's voice came through the intercom, measured and even. This is a restricted, light reflex certification drill. All participants will operate within Zone B. No live fire. Prop weapons only. Full mobility authorized. Infrared tags will log contact points. Failure to comply with perimeter rules will result in administrative pullout. Jade continued through the intercom, her voice steady and clipped. No one interrupted. This drill simulates response under confusion, verbal escalation, and unexpected contact. There is no start bell, there is no safety net. Movement begins when you do. Your reactions will be logged, your conduct will be reviewed. Broderick rolled his shoulders with a smirk. Let's see if she can lead without her PowerPoint. Jade glanced once in his direction, then tapped her radio mic. Control, confirm system readiness. In the tower, Commander Rivas leaned forward. All systems green, visuals hot, comms clean. Jade nodded once. Her next words came low, final, and absolute. Scenario start. Then she vanished into the maze, silent as gravity. The four men looked at each other. What now? One whispered. Broderick grinned. Now we show her who's in charge. They stepped into the narrow hallway. The plywood walls seemed to close in around them, and the air grew heavy. Their boots echoed louder than they should have. The silence wasn't natural, it was engineered. Deliberate. Somewhere ahead, unseen but already calculating every move, Lieutenant Commander Jade Cross moved like an unsheathed blade. Red light washed over every corner of the training labyrinth, turning hallways into blood-tinted tunnels and doorways into dark voids. Nothing stirred. No hum of fans, no buzz of electronics. Only the muted scuff of boots and the faint hiss of breath through a radio mic. Broderick broke the silence. Let's clear it fast, he muttered, gesturing left. She's probably hiding in a corner trying to spook us. Hale snorted. She's a PowerPoint with a pulse. Their voices bounced back at them, distorted, softer, warped by the acoustics so every syllable sounded just a little too loud. They rounded the first corner. Nothing. Zone clear, Hale said, moving on. At the back, one of the neutral officers hesitated. Was that a flicker? Too fast. Hale didn't even finish turning before his legs were swept clean out from under him. He hit the mat with a sharp thud, rifle clattering away. A gloved hand caught his jawline, locking him down, not brutal, but decisive. Hale, tagged, neutralized. Jade's voice echoed through the facility speakers, calm and surgical. Measured. Inevitable. Before Broderick could even react, she was gone again. Already part of the shadows. Where is? Broderick began, but the words broke off when he caught sight of movement. A flicker of motion slipping through a doorway to the right. He charged, boots pounding against the mat, arms raised in a half-guard, all brute force and ego, assuming strength would succeed where training failed. Lieutenant Commander Jade Cross didn't meet his rush head-on. She pivoted, fluid, precise. One hand slid past his outer elbow, redirecting his momentum with surgical ease. His balance vanished, his own body betraying him. He slammed into the mat on his right side, the impact knocking the air from his lungs. Before he could recover, she was already on him. One knee pinning his back, one arm locked firm across his shoulder line. Broderick, tagged, neutralized, came her voice through the loudspeaker. Steady, professional, final. In the tower, Commander Rivas didn't move. Didn't even blink. Holy hell, he muttered under his breath. The two remaining officers froze in the outer corridor. They weren't targets, but the air itself felt heavier now, charged with realization. One of them turned toward the infrared beacon near the ceiling as though it might open a way out. Jade stood over Broderick, still, calm, unflinching. He groaned. You set us up. She didn't gloat, didn't smirk, didn't even raise her voice. "You set yourself up," she said evenly, "when you forgot your hands are weapons, not tools for humiliation." Then she stepped back, allowing him to gather what was left of his composure. He stumbled once, barely catching his breath. Across the room, Hale sat slumped against the wall, dazed, staring at nothing. Up in the observation tower, one of the junior trainers glanced at Rivas. "Sir, that was a takedown straight from the Nestle CQC manual." Rivas nodded once. "It was," he said quietly, and she left 2 steps out. Back on the floor, Jade tapped her comms. "Scenario complete. Extract personnel. Debrief in 15. The red light stayed on. No one moved, not until she did. She walked through the hall exactly as she had entered, measured, composed, breathing steady, no sweat, no tremor, just the rhythmic echo of boots and silence. Behind her, Broderick leaned against the wall, as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. He looked to Hale, then to the others, and finally up at the control room glass. For the first time in 2 days, he had nothing to say. In the tower, Rivas keyed the mic. "Drill logged. Review board convenes at 800. Jade gave a single nod before stepping through the south exit. No applause, no acknowledgement, no celebration, just quiet correction, and the memory of a slap that had finally been answered, with discipline. The conduct review room was a far cry from the training floor. No red glow, no echoing walls, no plywood here, just polished oak panels, muted carpet, and that stubborn air conditioning that never quite matched the number of bodies in the room. The faint scent of varnish mixed with regulation coffee. At the head of the table sat Commander Elias Rivas, sleeves rolled, glasses balanced low on his nose. Beside him, Captain Ellen Monroe, senior adjudicator for the Naval Ethics and Conduct Committee, flipped through a folder stamped Internal Immediate. Across from them, Lieutenant Commander Jade Cross sat motionless, uniform crisp, hands folded, face unreadable. The faint pink trace of yesterday's slap had vanished completely. 3 seats down, Captain Broderick shifted in his chair. The swagger was gone. His left wrist bore a faint bruise from the restraint hold. Beside him, Lieutenant Hale looked wrecked. Bloodshot eyes, clenched jaw, a night without sleep etched into his face. Behind them, 2 neutral officers from the drill stood at attention, there to observe, not speak. One of them hadn't stopped watching Jade since she entered. Rivas began without ceremony. "This review is called under Article 147B, Physical Misconduct toward a Superior Officer. Evidence includes instructor logs, tower footage, and 5 eyewitness accounts." He looked over the rim of his glasses at Broderick. "You may speak if you choose." Broderick cleared his throat. "It was a bad call, sir, a lapse in judgment, just a moment during training." Monroe's voice was clinical. "The moment in question occurred during a lecture, Captain, a non-combat setting. Witnesses confirm it was not part of a drill or exercise. Do you dispute that?" Broderick stayed silent. Monroe turned her gaze to Hale. "Lieutenant?" He stiffened. I didn't initiate anything, ma'am. You participated in mockery, defiance of an instructor's authority, and collusion after the incident," Monroe replied. "Do you contest that characterization?" "No, ma'am." Rivas leaned back slightly, studying Jade. "Commander Cross, why didn't you file a report?" Her answer came soft but steady. "Because it wasn't necessary. The system doesn't need outrage. It just needs time." Monroe watched her closely. "You retaliated." "No, ma'am," Jade said. "I instructed under approved parameters." She slid a printed log sheet across the table. every timestamp, authorization, and waiver in order. Monroe leafed through the pages, her lips tightening, not in disapproval, but in respect. Rivas turned to the observers. "Any objections to the conduct of the drill?" One shook his head. The other said quietly, "It was surgical, sir. Nothing excessive, just exact." Monroe closed the folder. "Then this is our ruling." Her gaze fixed on Broderick. "Captain Broderick, your actions constitute physical misconduct, professional insubordination, and reputational damage to this facility. Effective immediately, you are suspended from field instruction and placed under administrative review pending reassignment." Broderick's shoulders sagged. "Hail. Formal reprimand. You're barred from interbranch seminars for the rest of the quarter." "Yes, ma'am." Finally, Monroe turned to Jade. "Lieutenant Commander Cross, your restraint under provocation and your corrective procedure are duly noted. A commendation will be forwarded to Regional Command under Ethics and Instructional Control." Jade gave a single nod. "Understood." Rivas stood, signaling the end. "Dismissed." No one moved quickly or spoke. The room seemed to hold its breath. When Lieutenant Commander Jade Cross finally stood and turned to leave, the junior officer who'd been watching her the entire time, quiet, observant, saying nothing, gave her a small, instinctive nod. Not from rank, from respect. Soldier to soldier. By 0630, sunlight broke clean across the eastern edge of the base. Long shadows stretched over the gravel parade grounds, and boots hit the ground with a little more purpose than usual. The energy had shifted. Less talk, fewer jokes. It wasn't calm from quiet hours. It was calm born of correction. Jade Cross walked the outer perimeter trail alone. Same posture as always, back straight, gaze forward, hands folded neatly behind her. No medals, no entourage, just presence. Those who passed her stood a little straighter now, not from fear, but from recognition. A young Marine, who hadn't known her before that week, offered a brief nod from across the path. Jade didn't slow, but returned the gesture with a single glance. Just enough to say, "You're learning." From the barracks walkway, Petty Officer Lorne caught up beside her, matching pace, adjusting his cap. "Morning, Commander." "Lorne." He tilted his head toward the chow hall. "They're real quiet today, even the officers." "They'll find their voices again," she said. "Hopefully they'll use them better next time." Lorne smirked. "Guess they finally learned the first rule." Jade glanced sideways. "Which one?" He grinned. "Never touch a seal." She didn't laugh, just let out a soft exhale through her nose, the ghost of a smirk hidden in it. They walked together past the West Range, before Lorne peeled off toward the armory. Jade continued alone, heading for the admin block. Inside, Captain Broderick sat on a bench near the personnel gate. Alone, uniformed, a duffel at his feet. Not dismissed yet, but no longer part of anything moving forward. His shoulders sagged with the weight of what he finally understood. She passed without a word, no nod, no judgment, no lecture. He wasn't owed one. Outside the instructor wing, 2 new candidates walked by, a pair of fresh officers, just cleared for joint training. They didn't know the story, not yet, but when Jade walked past, they stopped talking. The silence that followed her was its own gravity. She entered the staff hallway, paused by the wall-mounted roster, and crossed off the morning's field module with a single, deliberate stroke. Done. No speeches, no drills. Just the quiet authority of someone who'd already taught enough. Across the base, the tone of conversation was changing. Not out of fear, but out of understanding. Discipline isn't passivity, it's knowing when to act, and never needing to act again. Would you have stayed calm if someone slapped you in uniform? Do you believe discipline hits harder than retaliation when everyone's watching? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every one of them. If this story reminded you what real strength looks like, hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed with the bell icon on so you never miss the next mission. Share this video with someone who still thinks silence means surrender. Our next operation's already on your screen. Go watch it now. I'll see you there, same time, same place. Major Tom's Tales.